You know, I've always known that I should eat healthier. I grew up in an extended family of doctors, so I constantly heard warnings about how artificial food coloring or the burned bits on grilled meat could cause cancer. But when I started digging deeper myself, researching the detailed ingredients in the foods I was eating and their specific health outcomes, I realized just how complicated the situation is. It's no wonder we have an epidemic of chronic diseases. Obesity is impacting a significant percentage of the population. Cancer is showing up in younger and younger people, and metabolic issues are becoming the vast norm. I'm Dr. Hilary Lynn, a Stanford-trained practicing longevity physician, and I'm board certified in internal medicine. My mission is to help you understand the science of living longer and healthier. From the guar gum in my soy milk to the pesticides in my locally grown veggies, I've been shocked to find how hard it is to truly eat clean. And that's why I decided to do this episode. I want to empower you not to feel overwhelmed, but to feel informed and capable of making the right choices for your health. So today, let's dive in and decode nutrition labels together, because taking control of what you put inside your bodies is one of the most powerful steps you can take for your longevity. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of why nutrition labels can be so deceptive. As consumers, we often think we're making healthy choices, when in reality, the food industry is taking advantage of our assumptions. Let's start with the common marketing terms like natural and no added sugar. These are some of the biggest culprits when it comes to misleading people. The word natural makes us think of something pure, unprocessed, and healthy. But the truth is, natural is not regulated. Companies can slap that label on products with minimal oversight, which means the item might still contain preservatives or other harmful additives. Similarly, no added sugar sounds fantastic because, yeah, we don't want any additional sugar, but it often means the product contains fruit concentrates or other sweeteners that can still spike your blood sugar and therefore your insulin and cause health problems such as aging and disease. Another misleading tactic is manipulating serving sizes to make a product seem healthier. Imagine you're buying a cereal that contains 8 grams of sugar per serving. That doesn't sound too bad until you realize the serving size is only a fourth of a cup. Most of us pour at least a full cup of cereal into our bowls, meaning we end up consuming double or even triple the amount of sugar and calories without even realizing it. There are so many other misleading labels that we should be aware of. Made with whole grains, for example, implies that all of the grains used were whole, but it often just means that there's a small amount of whole grains mixed in with a ton of refined ones. Look out for 100% whole grains on the label if that's what you're going for. Multigrain is similarly misleading. It sounds like it's healthy, but it often just means multiple refined grains. It doesn't guarantee any whole grains at all. So I typically just disregard this kind of label completely. No cholesterol implies a healthier choice, but many foods labeled as no cholesterol never contain cholesterol to begin with. Cholesterol is only found in animal products, so no cholesterol peanut butter is just marketing fluff. Not to mention, this is playing on some of our beliefs from a past health era. We used to tell everyone you can't eat cholesterol, it's going to make your own cholesterol go up, but it's a very nuanced story. Actually, it's not the cholesterol that's bad for you, it's where the cholesterol is going. So LDL cholesterol goes towards the arteries and results in plaque. But HDL cholesterol is so-called good cholesterol or good lipids, and it's bringing them to your organs in a way that's positive, that you can digest them. It's not the cholesterol that's bad anyways, but even if you're eating cholesterol, your body often doesn't immediately take the cholesterol and turn it into cholesterol. We break it down into different parts and we recycle it into whatever we need. We're pretty smart, it turns out, or at least our cells know what they're doing. Instead, you probably have to watch out for things like saturated fats if you're somebody who's pretty high risk for dyslipidemia or heart disease. Made with real fruit is another tricky one. This sounds great, but in many cases, the actual amount of real fruit is so minimal, you need a microscope to find the real fruit. Lightly sweetened has no meaning whatsoever. The FDA doesn't regulate this term. This could mean 1 teaspoon of sugar added. It could be a whole tablespoon, or it could be whatever amount of sugar that they consider lightly sweetened. Gluten-free. Again, like the cholesterol-free label, many of the products labeled gluten-free probably didn't even have gluten in the first place. Like labeling rice gluten-free is nonsensical in my mind, because obviously, to me, rice doesn't have gluten. It is a wheat product. It is a little bit meaningless. Also, unless you have a specific reason to avoid gluten, these products aren't necessarily healthier for you anyways. If you have celiac disease, obviously you need to avoid gluten. And if you have a true gluten intolerance that causes a lot of distress, you probably also want to avoid gluten. But for the rest of us, a bit of gluten isn't bad here and there. Maybe you want to avoid too many refined carbs. I think that's the bigger culprit and the bigger villain to our health. But the gluten itself is not necessarily the main problem for most of us. In addition, some companies will use multiple types of sugar to disguise the fact that no one sugar is taking up a large amount of the volume of the food. Actually, if you look at ingredients lists, they start with the highest weight ingredient. And so if sugar makes up most of a product, it's going to show up as first. But by using small amounts of different types of sugar, like corn syrup solids, fructose, or molasses, they all show up as maybe ingredient 5, 6, and 7. So it doesn't look like it's the main ingredient. But cumulatively, the sugar content is still very high. So it's really important to recognize all of the different names for sugar. And there's hundreds of different names. Think about the last time you bought a snack, maybe a granola bar or a juice that claimed to be healthy. Did you even look at the label and notice all of the unfamiliar ingredients? Or maybe take a look at a nutrition label and try and understand exactly how many carbs are in it. Most of us don't have the time to analyze every ingredient list. And that's exactly what food companies are counting on when they add misleading labels to the front of the package. There are efforts underway to make front of package labeling clearer and more informative for customers. So that's the stuff on the front. Nutrition labels tend to be on the back. Countries like the UK use something called traffic light labeling. So that produces a very quick visual cue by indicating what levels of sugar, salt, and fat are with colors, green, amber, and red. Europe has also introduced a Nutri-Score system, which rates the overall nutritional quality of a product from A to E. Countries like Chile and Mexico have implementing warning labels for products high in sugar, sodium, or saturated fat, using a black stop sign to discourage less healthy choices. Australia and New Zealand have a health star rating, providing a simple rating from 0.5 to 5 stars to reflect a product's healthiness. And here in the US, we are working on standardized front of package labeling to help consumers easily identify healthier options. These initiatives aim to combat misleading practices and make it easier for consumers to make informed choices. The takeaway here is that nutrition labels are just not as straightforward as they seem. The food industry uses these tactics to make their products appear healthier. But don't worry, we're going to break down exactly what to look for so you can take back control over what you're putting into your body. Okay, now that we've discussed the deceptive practices in labeling, let's dive into the key components of what a nutrition label shows you. So the first thing to look at is the serving size. This is crucial because all of the information that follows is based on that specific amount. It's easy to assume that the entire package is a single serving, but more often than not, a package contains multiple servings. This is especially true for snacks and drinks. When you don't pay attention to the serving size, you might be consuming way more calories, sugar, or unhealthy fats than you realize. For example, a bottle of iced tea might seem like one serving, but it actually often will contain 2.5 servings. How many of us drink a portion of an iced tea and then we put it in our fridge and then we wait and have another portion and then another portion later? Most of us are drinking it all in one go, right? It really means that you have to spend a little bit extra time multiplying out all of the calories and the sugar and everything else. It makes it kind of arduous, and I find this really annoying, but unfortunately that is the reality. Take the extra time, just do an eyeball of what's going on with the serving size when you look at the label. Now, I want to walk through a clear example here. We have the Gold Emblem Classic Blend Trail Mix. The value size bag contains 28 servings, each serving being 1 ounce or a fourth of a cup. A single serving contains 140 calories, but if you were to eat the entire bag, which is honestly what most of us would do if we were hiking around or honestly just had this in the car, you'd actually consume 3,920 calories. That's almost 4,000 calories, 2 days worth of calories. You can see so easily how, if you're just not paying attention to the serving size, you could end up consuming far more calories than you intended. This kind of labeling just makes it hard to estimate the true nutritional impact of foods. I really recommend take a look at that serving size. It's the first thing that you can do to make it easier to tell what you're putting in your body. Another key component, of course, to pay attention to is the ingredient list. This isn't part of the nutrition facts panel itself, but it's just as important. Ingredients are listed in descending order by weight, which means the first few ingredients make up the vast majority of the product. For example, if sugar, corn syrup, or any of its aliases are listed amongst the first few ingredients, that is a red flag. Ideally, you want to look for shorter ingredient lists with items you recognize and can pronounce. So this usually means the product is less processed. So we'll go into some detail about specifics with ingredients shortly. The ingredient list can also reveal hidden additives like preservatives and artificial colors. Some of these, like BHT or artificial dyes, have been linked to potential health risks. So if you see a long list of chemicals, things that seem like molecules that you would find in a lab, it's a really good idea to reconsider whether that product belongs in your diet. Simpler is generally better when it comes to your health. We did talk on another episode all about these types of different ingredients, so I'll only brush over them today briefly, but artificial dyes, for example, have a lot of links to neurodegeneration, ADHD, and so forth. Macronutrients are another key part of the label. So these are what people are talking about when they talk about counting their macros, understanding how much of each macronutrient they're consuming to meet health and fitness goals. Each of these macronutrients, protein, carbohydrates, and fats, play an important role in your overall health, but they are not created equal. Protein, these days, we focus on a lot because unfortunately, modern living means that we are eating less healthy forms of protein and more unhealthy forms of carbs, unfortunately. Fats, a little bit here and a little bit there. We probably don't get enough of the good fats and we get way too much of the bad fats. Protein is essential for muscle repair and metabolic function, so you need that. Carbs are your body's main source of energy, but again, it's very important to distinguish between complex carbs like those in whole grains and simple sugars or refined sugars, which can cause the blood sugar and therefore insulin spikes that lead to issues down the road. And like I mentioned, fats can be super nuanced. Like the polyunsaturated fats are really good, and omega-3s obviously are fantastic, but trans fats and high levels of saturated fats can be really harmful, especially for people who are high risk for cardiac disease. Look for labels that list healthy fats like monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, and avoid anything that says partially hydrogenated, which indicates the presence of trans fats. That is pretty highly regulated these days now, so hopefully you don't see this on any labels, especially if you're traveling. It can be a little bit trickier. Also, a lot of processed foods, even though they might not have trans fats inserted into them at the beginning, they can create new trans fats through the processing itself because the high heats that are used for processing can create trans fats. Saturated fats are also something most people should be careful of, but it can be tolerated within reason depending on one's personal risk status. Just noting that most of us eat way too many saturated fats, unfortunately. No matter how healthy you are, modern living just includes so much in the way of saturated fats, so most people can do with a little bit of a decrease there. One often overlooked component is actually fiber. So fiber is not technically a macronutrient, but it is a type of carbohydrate that's actually really crucial for your health. So important for your digestive health, and it can also help control your blood sugar levels. So when you have fruit, for example, you've got the fiber as well as the sugar, and when it comes together, it helps control your blood sugar levels. Of course, there are some fruit that just don't have a lot of fiber, and then it's going to spike you really hard. If you're using something like a CGM, then you can see that directly after you eat a banana or an orange or something like that. However, many food manufacturers add synthetic fibers to products and label them as high fiber. This is not the same as natural fibers, and they're actually not that helpful for you. These synthetic fibers are called names like inulin or polydextrose. They do not contain the same benefits as natural fibers found in foods like oats, vegetables, and legumes. I'm just going to list a few of the examples here. Non-viscous soluble fibers, such as the inulin, the fructooligosaccharides, and wheat dextrin, do not provide the same health benefits as high viscosity fibers known as psyllium and beta-glucan. These are proven to help lower cholesterol and improve glycemic control. Luckily, this is what's found in your fiber supplements most of the time. Viscosity refers to the thickness of a fiber, when mixed with water, which impacts how it moves through the digestive system. High viscosity fibers create this gel-like consistency, which helps slow digestion and stabilize blood sugar levels. The non-viscous fibers that I was talking about that a lot of food manufacturers will add to their food products to make it seem healthier don't actually contribute to the stool water content like the high viscosity fibers do, and therefore it doesn't actually help you poo better. In addition, fermentable fibers like inulin or oligofructose may not affect your satiety or food intake, and it can cause GI symptoms like bloating and flatulence, so gas, without providing many of the significant health benefits. Several medical bodies like the American Gastroenterological Association and the American College of Gastroenterology note that when you have finely ground wheat bran, that can actually decrease stool water content and harden your stools, making it less effective for constipation relief compared to the coarser fibers. When you're looking at a label and looking at the ingredients, try to choose products with natural sources of fiber. This is going to help you maintain better digestive health and keep you feeling full longer, keep your blood sugars steady, and benefit your long-term health. So when you understand these key components, serving size, macronutrients, fibers, and the ingredients list, you gain the power to make intentional choices that truly support your health and longevity. This knowledge can help you cut through the noise and marketing jargon and identify what is genuinely good for you versus what is simply cleverly marketed to seem healthy. So now that we've explored the basics of reading a nutrition level, let's dive into some of the specific ingredients you need to watch out for. I spoke a little bit already about them, but I want to dive in further. These are the components that can sneak their way into your diet and negatively impact your health. They're usually cleverly disguised too, so I think it's really important to bring them up. First of all, added sugars. I care so much about added sugars because they're so sneaky and they're in literally everything, from your breakfast cereals to your flavored yogurt to granola bars, even salad dressings and pasta sauces. Flavored yogurts, oh my goodness, this is such the bane of my health life because I love yogurt. Yogurt can contain so many great nutrients like protein, for example, but then it's got all of these sugars added to them. Many flavored yogurts actually contain more sugar than even a can of soda, even though it's being marketed as a healthy option. Similarly, cereals that claim to be whole grain often contain, again, like I mentioned before, multiple forms of added sugars, such as high fructose corn syrup, brown sugar, and barley malt. So it's really important to check the ingredient list carefully, especially with products that seem healthy on the surface. Consuming high amounts of added sugars can lead to so many different issues, which we probably find quite obvious, but like obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, accelerated aging can even be caused by the added sugars. They provide empty calories, meaning they contribute calories without any beneficial nutrients. Imagine your body is a car and the fuel is your food. Added sugars are like really low quality gasoline. That's kind of like what added sugars are. They'll give you a burst of energy, but then they'll harm the engine over time and you'll wear out your body. They also cause, obviously, these rapid spikes in your blood sugar, your blood glucose, and the insulin levels, which over time can contribute to insulin resistance. So remember, when you have high glucose, high glucose, high glucose, then you have high insulin, high insulin, high insulin, then your organs start to ignore that insulin because it's like the boy who cried wolf. It's like, who cares anymore? So the more it ignores it, the more insulin resistant you get, and you end up with problems like diabetes and all this metabolic disorder. The food industry also uses a variety of names for added sugars to disguise their presence in products. There are the common names that you probably have heard of, like sucrose and high fructose corn syrup, but sugars can also be listed as agave nectar, barley malt, brown rice syrup, cane juice crystals, corn syrup solids, fruit juice concentrate, maltose, evaporated cane juice, crystalline fructose, and molasses, amongst many, many others. There's actually over 300 different names for sugars. I used to think that it was just over 50, and then I realized there were over 100, and then I recently checked. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's actually over 300 names for different types of sugars. Imagine if you're going to a party where someone keeps changing their hat and their name tag. You'd seriously struggle to keep track of them. That is exactly what the food industry does with sugars, giving them over these 300 different names to hide their true identity. It makes it really easy then for manufacturers to add multiple types of sugars in small amounts, so that, again, remember that first ingredient is the highest concentrated ingredient, and they're trying to avoid making sugar that first ingredient. The product might be loaded with it even though it's not there up top. Something that's really surprising to a lot of people is that so many healthy foods like granola bars and fruit yogurts contain just as much added sugar as candy bars. Take a look the next time you're shopping for yogurt. Sometimes flavored yogurt can contain upwards of 20 grams of sugar per serving. That's equivalent to 5 teaspoons of sugar. And this hidden sugar really adds to your daily sugar intake. It often exceeds the recommended limit without you even realizing it. So actually, we recommend as the medical community, including the American Heart Association, that people really limit their daily intake of added sugar. So women get 25 grams a day, which is about 6 teaspoons, and men get 36 grams a day, which is about 9 teaspoons. I would actually argue that one would benefit most from zero added sugars because we already get so much in the way of carbs from other sources of carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are just a fancy name for sugar, and you don't need any added sugar in your life, actually. I would just aim for as little as possible if I were you. To reduce your intake of the added sugars, opt for unsweetened versions of products such as plain yogurt or cereals that don't have added sugar. Or if you're like me and you occasionally will go out and get like a boba drink, a pearl milk tea, I get no pearls and I tell them 0% sugar. I know it sounds really boring, but then you get used to it. So your taste buds do turn over on average every 2 weeks. And so if you eat less added sugar products, you actually won't need nearly as much in the way of sweetness. You can actually add natural sweetness yourself if you want by using fresh foods, or like me, if you like honey or maple syrup in small amounts. And like I mentioned, you will probably grow to like less and less sweet things over time. Artificial ingredients and preservatives are our next no-no. They are so commonly found in like all packaged foods, but particularly in diet sodas, sugar-free gum, low-calorie desserts, and many other processed foods. Aspartame, for example, is so widely used in diet sodas and sugar-free products. Sodium benzoate is also added to acidic foods and beverages like soft drinks, salad dressings, fruit juices to prevent spoilage. But these ingredients can really be bad for you. Products labeled as sugar-free often contain artificial sweeteners like aspartame or sucralose. These actually can lead to increased sugar cravings and potential disruptions in your glucose regulation. Artificial colors can also be harmful, like I've mentioned previously in other episodes as well. They've been linked to behavioral issues in children, such as ADHD and autism spectrum disorder. They make food look way more appealing, but they really have been associated with carcinogenic, cancer-causing, allergenic, allergy-causing, and mutagenic, genetic mutation, cytotoxic, toxic to cells, and even clastogenic, causing chromosome breakage activities. That's a huge mouthful, but basically, brightly colored candy can cause all sorts of havoc in your child and yourself. Some children may actually become more hyperactive after consuming colorants rather than the sugar itself. It's important for parents to be mindful of what their children eat, especially, but also to keep in mind for yourself. I know my partner sometimes acts like a child. He loves candy. I really had to tone down his behavior after we started living together because it could be a big problem for adults as well as for children. Artificial sweeteners like aspartame, acesulfame K, and sucralose are associated as well with increased risks of cancer, cardiovascular disease, and type 2 diabetes. For example, higher consumers of artificial sweeteners have a higher risk of cancer and heart disease. These types of sweeteners can also interfere with the gut microbiome. That's a community of bacteria that helps regulate digestion, immunity, and your overall health and longevity. Think of the gut microbiome as a thriving garden. Artificial sweeteners can act like chemicals that disturb this balance, leading to poor health outcomes. Now let's talk about those preservatives and also emulsifiers. So sodium benzoate and other preservatives have been linked as well to disturbed behavior in children and neurotoxic properties in animal studies. That means that it's literally killing off neurons. So that's a problem. Emulsifiers, which are used to stabilize processed food and create a smooth mouthfeel. I love that word, mouthfeel, but it really does describe what it does. They've been associated with increased risk of everything from heart disease to metabolic syndrome. And these substances can really disrupt the gut lining, leading to inflammation and potential health issues. So generally, ultra-processed foods, which contain combinations of all of these problematic ingredients like the artificial ingredients, the preservatives, the emulsifiers, the colorants, are particularly concerning. UPFs, as they're called, have been linked to increased risks of obesity, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, and mental health disorders. Imagine if your diet is made up largely of packaged and processed items. Your life may be more convenient, but the lack of real nutrition and abundance of artificial additives can lead to such long-term health problems, making it so much more important to prioritize whole natural foods. One way to think about it is when you are eating junk food, you are overfeeding your body in terms of calories, but you are causing malnutrition. Your body is going to want more and more food actually because it thinks it's malnourished. Another problem is when you have certain things like artificial sweeteners, they provide a sweet taste without the calories, and your body often reacts by craving even more sugar. So this leads to a vicious cycle of cravings and energy crashes. There is a cephalic response, actually, a little response where you can cause a sugar spike, even if there's no calories involved. And it can also lead to other problems like an addiction to sugar. So like I mentioned in prior episodes, when we taste sugar, that actually soothes us. And that's why we reach for sugar and sometimes fats when we're feeling down. It's very soothing. And we actually give sugar drops to babies when we're performing circumcisions. But this can lead to an overall problem because you get all these cravings. And so even if that initial dose of sugar or artificial sweetener has no or little calories, it can lead to further cravings in the future. So I typically say just avoid it entirely if possible. To limit exposure, really just reduce your intake of ultra-processed foods. Opt for the natural, unprocessed alternatives whenever possible. Let's talk about fats. Unhealthy fats primarily are those trans fats and saturated fats. So trans fats, particularly those industrially produced through partial hydrogenation of vegetable oils, are consistently associated with increased cardiovascular disease and higher all-cause mortality. That means death due to any reason. They're often hidden in baked goods like cookies, cakes, and pastries, as well as margarine, microwave popcorn, and fast food items like French fries and chicken nuggets. They raise your LDL cholesterol, often called the bad cholesterol, or like I mentioned, I prefer bad lipids, and lower your HDLC, the good lipid. Imagine if your arteries are like pipes that carry water. Trans fats are like the sludge that builds up in those pipes. I'm super simplifying the process. This is not at all what directly happens, but basically when the trans fats come in and the cholesterol builds up, it causes inflammation, and then this plaque builds up. It leads to a clogging of those pipes, and that contributes to atherogenesis and therefore can lead to things like heart attacks or strokes. Many medical bodies across the board, across the world, really recommend avoiding trans fats altogether. There's no good reason for trans fats. So remember, even though that these are banned in many countries, including the US, a lot of times ultra-processed foods create trans fats after the fact. So it's not put in as an ingredient, but if you're processing it with high temperatures, it's created. And just because baked goods and snack foods are marketed as zero trans fat, it really doesn't mean that they're free of these harmful fats. Also, another trick that's done is that if it's a small enough volume, you don't have to report it on the nutrition label. So if you have multiple servings, for example, it might actually add up to be a significant amount of trans fats that you're consuming. Saturated fats are also considered unhealthy, especially when consumed in high amounts, which unfortunately most of us do. I remember I was trying to follow the AHA's recommendation of 3 grams of saturated fats or lower, and it was so hard for me. Because I somehow got in my head, I'm like, I'm going to be so healthy so I can control my bad lipids because I have genetically higher lipid levels, higher LDL-C. And so I knew that I had to control it somehow. So before I got started on all the medications that I love now, I did try with the extreme diet method. And I found that it was so hard to stay under 3 grams a day. Like, can you believe it? Like, just have a few eggs and then you're over that limit. And not to mention like everything that's in the dairy products or whatever other kinds of food that you're eating. It's nearly impossible. I commend anybody who successfully avoids most saturated fats from their life. It appears everywhere, but the most obvious places are in animal products. So foods like fatty cuts of meat, full fat dairy products, butter, and also even some plant products like palm and coconut oil are major sources of saturated fats. So if you have high intake of saturated fats, typically, unless you're one of the lucky few people who don't seem to absorb saturated fats very well, typically most people will have increased levels of LDL-C with saturated fats, and that can lead to a higher risk of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality. Replacing your saturated fats with unsaturated fats, particularly polyunsaturated fatty acids known as PUFAs, has been shown definitively to reduce these risks. If you're like me, you just want to keep it simple, I cook everything in olive oil, literally everything. I know there's a lot of people who are like, oh no, you should use butter to cook eggs or whatever, it tastes better. I don't even care. Like, I just don't want to think about it. It just takes way too much brain power to want to think about, like, okay, if I have this amount of butter, that's okay. But then if I go slightly over, then I'm having way too much saturated fat. I'm like, olive oil all the way. Olive oil is great for you. It tastes amazing. You can use it for cooking. You can use it for your salads. I love it. I learned that Starbucks even has olive oil coffee. So I had this. They only have it in certain locations, and I got it in Tahoe. I don't know where to get it anywhere else right now, but I freaking love it. It tastes delicious, and it's so smooth without the negative sort of ingredients that we often add to things like coffee or drinks to keep it smooth. So no emulsifiers involved, and no even dairy if you don't want it involved. They just use plain olive oil, and it makes it so smooth and delicious. It's amazing. Let's quickly speak about a common one that we worry about, which is sodium. High sodium content is common in foods all around us, but especially in canned soups, deli meats, instant noodles, packaged snacks like chips and crackers, and so on. So you can tell the pattern here, which is that it shows up a lot in packaged foods, and it shows up a lot when you're going out to eat, for example. Canned vegetables can contain a high amount of sodium as a preservative, actually. So even foods that seem healthy and say that they're preservative free, you want to watch out, because a lot of times they're adding sodium to make it more shelf stable. A single can of soup, for example, can have nearly 1,000 milligrams of sodium, which is 2/3 of a recommended daily intake for many adults already. Excessive sodium intake is also associated with increased blood pressure. This is a problem for certain people, not everybody. So if you're somebody who already has high blood pressure, or you have kidney disease, or you have heart disease, or you're at high risk for any of these, you want to watch out, because it can contribute to more heart disease, stroke, and kidney disease. If you are one of these people, definitely want to follow the guidelines from American Heart Association, which says to limit to less than 1,500 milligrams a day. Remember, if you have high blood pressure, chronic kidney disease, diabetes, or if you're older, or if you are of a high risk background, for example, it's been shown that in African American backgrounds, there's a higher risk of high blood pressure and heart disease due to higher sodium. For the general population, if you are healthy and none of these people, you still want to limit your sodium intake to less than about 2,300 milligrams a day. Another source of major concern is MSG. MSG is a flavor enhancer from Asia. It was actually invented in Japan. You can see there's like a giant factory there that makes a lot of the world's MSG. There's many more factories at this point in time, but it used to all come from this place. And I remember when I was growing up, my grandmother would just have a bucket of MSG, and she would just add it to everything, because it does make everything taste delicious. It's like salty, it's umami, it's amazing. It's often found in a lot of processed foods, restaurant dishes, and snacks everywhere. MSG basically is both not as bad as the media makes it out to be, but it is as bad for different reasons. It's not like a toxin in terms of like, you're not going to poison yourself by eating MSG. However, it is like a super concentrated sodium, is my shortcut of remembering how it's bad for you. So you only want to limit yourself to a small amount, which unfortunately you can't do if you're eating a lot of packaged foods or you're eating out. So that's why some people are like, just avoid the whole thing. But it's similar in terms of risk to high amounts of sodium. And it's been linked to various metabolic disorders, so obesity, diabetes, and hypertension. And MSG can induce actually hypothalamic lesions, so damage to the part of the brain that helps you regulate your hunger and energy. So that leads you to eat more, for example, or feel tired. It also can cause oxidative stress, which is an imbalance between the free radicals and the antioxidants in the body. And it can lead to leptin resistance. So that's a condition where the body doesn't properly respond to the hormone leptin that regulates hunger. So then you keep eating. This can all contribute to obesity and metabolic syndrome. Additionally, MSG consumption has been associated with increased arterial blood pressure and renal dysfunction, particularly in hypertensive individuals. And again, similar to the sodium, people with pre-existing metabolic disorders like obesity, diabetes, and hypertension are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of MSG. Basically, MSG is not good, and it's very bad for certain people who are higher risk. So I spoke a little bit about emulsifiers earlier, but I just wanted to quickly mention them again because I wanted to mention where they appear. Emulsifiers cause that smooth mouthfeel. It's found in a lot of plant-based milk alternatives. So this made me so sad because I was trying to find some sort of plant milk that me and my partner could enjoy. And especially my partner, he's very annoying about nut milks because he's like, oh, it tastes so watery. And I'm like, okay, fine. Let's try and find some smoother forms of it. And then I discovered they're smooth because they have added emulsifiers. So watch out. Look out for ingredients like carrageenan and anything with a gum, whatever, in your nut milks, also in ice creams, also in creamy salad dressing, and also in any processed desserts. Other names are polysorbates such as polysorbate 20, P20, or polysorbate 80, P80, which are used typically in baked goods, ice cream, and some condiments to maintain its texture and consistency. Carboxymethyl cellulose is added to baked goods and sauces also to improve that mouthfeel. Long story short, it makes things feel so awesome, but they have really bad negative health effects. They can really impair your gut health, just to get specific, by impairing that gut epithelial barrier function, leading to the leaky gut or greater intestinal permeability. So remember, we've talked about in prior episodes that the cells of your gut are like bricks, and then the mortar in between them are the proteins that create the tight junction. And all of these emulsifiers can loosen them up or just cause problems so that toxins can leach into deeper parts of your body. And that causes general chronic inflammation. That is bad for so many reasons. It can cause IBS, it can cause chronic disease, it can cause brain fog, it can cause heart disease even. There was actually a study that showed certain emulsifiers such as celluloses and monoglycerides and diglycerides of fatty acids were linked to increase of heart disease. Wow. And carboxymethyl cellulose, polysorbate 80, have also been linked to metabolic syndrome and obesity in some animal studies. Not to mention the damage that they do to your gut microbiome, which we've talked about so many times as being integral for your brain health, your heart health, your everything health, your mood even. There's also some concerns about the cancer risk associated with emulsifier consumption. So if nothing else, it can cause cancer. Another study did show that higher intakes of emulsifiers like mono and diglycerides of fatty acids and carrageenans were associated with increased risks of overall cancer, and including breast cancer and prostate cancer. These emulsifiers can cause everything from diabetes to cancers. Just be careful when you're trying to buy something that seems healthy like plant-based milk. Just watch out for these types of emulsifiers. They make them feel better in your mouth, but they can be really, really bad for your health. Let's talk about preservatives. So preservatives like BHT and BHA are commonly used in breakfast cereals, packaged snacks, and processed meats. You can find BHA in products like potato chips, gum, and even butter spreads. These preservatives are there to prevent oils from going rancid, but their potential health risks make them worth avoiding. Long-term exposures to certain preservatives like potassium sorbate, PS, butylated hydroxynosol, BHA, sodium benzoate, SB, calcium propionate, CP, and boric acid, BA, have been shown to cause significant hepatorenal oxidative damage. So that is damage to your liver and kidneys due to oxidative stress. This can lead to alterations in your organ function mediated through inflammatory reactions, oxidative stress, and cytokine production. Some preservatives can also cause immunosuppression, so you can get sick more easily from infections like viruses. This is because you have alterations of your white blood cell count and your red blood cell count profiles, as well as upregulation of pro-inflammatory cytokines. Preservatives can weaken the immune system, making it harder for your body to fight off infections and other health threats. Also, I'm just going to quickly mention, not exactly a food, but cosmetic preservatives like phenoxyethanol, methylparaben, and propylparaben have been shown to induce cytotoxicity. So killing off your cells and decrease the collagen secretion in human skin cells. That can affect your skin health by reducing your elasticity and accelerating your aging. Not a good thing for anybody. In addition, preservatives like isothiazolinones and formaldehyde-releasing compounds can cause allergic contact dermatitis and other skin sensitization issues. Synthetic preservatives in food have also been linked to hypersensitivity, asthma, neurological damage, hyperactivity, and potential carcinogenic effects, like I mentioned before. Regulatory authorities often set acceptable quantitative limits for these substances, but if you're eating a lot of ultra-processed foods, you're going to get cumulative effects and interactions from the multiple different preservatives. Just reduce your exposure to ultra-processed foods if possible. Look for snacks that use natural preservatives like vitamin E or rosemary extract instead, and just stick to whole foods. They might rot quicker, but just go to the market more quickly, or if you're like me, just get grocery delivery every few days so that your food stays fresh. There's a lot of interesting stuff here, so I apologize in advance, but this is a super long episode it's turning out to be. So let's talk about hormones and antibiotics. RBST, or recombinant bovine somatotropin, is a synthetic hormone used to increase milk production in dairy cows. Its use has been associated with increasing milk yield, but potential harms have definitely been identified both for the cow and for humans. One of the major concerns of RBST is the increased risk of mastitis in cows. So that's an infection of the udder tissue that requires antibiotic treatment. Then you get increased use of antibiotics, which leads to concerns about antimicrobial resistance, which is a significant public health risk. When antibiotics are overused in livestock, bacteria develop resistance, making antibiotics less effective for treating infections in humans. It's really hard to discover new antibiotics, by the way. I don't know if that's something people realize. We can't just make more. It takes a really long time to outsmart the bacteria. RBST treated cows also exhibit altered metabolic parameters. So they have higher levels of non-esterified fatty acids and also insulin-like growth factors, IGF-1 and 2. So these changes can negatively affect their metabolic health and lead to lower body condition scores. They have worse health, increased susceptibility to metabolic disorders such as ketosis, which is bad for them. Another issue associated with RBST is an impact on their reproductive performance. RBST reduces pregnancy rates in cows, particularly in first-time mothers, affecting the overall health and productivity of the dairy herds. What about humans, you might be wondering? Some studies do indicate that RBST doesn't significantly alter the composition of the milk they produce or increase the risk of antibiotic residues. But there are some concerns still about the increased levels of IGF-1 in the milk from RBST-treated cows. IGF-1 is a hormone that plays a role in cell growth, and elevated levels have been linked to certain risks like cancer. So breast cancer, prostate cancer, and colon cancer have been linked. And the biological activity of IGF-1 from oral consumption is minimal, but these concerns have led to the banning of RBST in several regions, including the EU and Canada. In the US, you can find labels on many of your milks to reduce your RBST exposure. Organic certification also prohibits the use of synthetic hormones like RBST, so that provides you a safer option. By being aware of all these ingredients and their potential impacts on your health, you can make better choices for yourself and your loved ones. The fewer additives, artificial ingredients, and harmful preservatives, the better off you'll be in the long run. Now that we've tackled some of the most problematic ingredients lurking in our food, let's move into practical strategies, because I want you to feel like you can do something about all of this. So I want you to feel empowered. I want you to know what to look for, what to avoid. I'm going to leave you with some simple guidelines that can make a big difference in your long-term health. First, my favorite strategy is the rule of 5. This is really easy. You just aim for products with fewer than 5 ingredients. And ideally, they should all be recognizable. So if you pick up a product and you see a long list of ingredients that sound like they belong in a chemistry lab, that's your cue to put it back. If you're looking for a peanut butter, choose one that has only peanuts, or maybe peanuts and a little bit of salt. Compare that with another brand that has sugar, hydrogenated oils, and preservatives, and you'll see how much better the simpler option is. It's also a good way to cut through all that marketing hype. Marketers love to put stuff like natural or no added sugar on packages, but if you turn around and just scan that ingredient list, you can make a much more informed choice really quickly. Even better than a rule of 5 is to just focus on whole foods with minimal processing. If foods don't have a nutrition label, then it's awesome because it means it hasn't been processed at all. It doesn't need to have a nutrition label. One surprising thing that I just want to mention is that just because a product is in the organic section doesn't mean that it's healthy. Some organic junk foods are still junk food. I've seen people load up their carts with things like organic cookies and chips, thinking like they're making a healthier choice, but doesn't mean that they're low in sugar or free of unhealthy fats. So read labels even in the organic aisle. Many people know this trick, but when you're at the grocery store, shop the perimeter. The grocery stores are designed with fresh whole foods around the perimeter: produce, dairies, meats, and fresh bakery items. Fresh is key here. You don't want the super packaged one. And you also want to make sure that when the grocery store is making the baked items, items, they aren't adding preservatives to it. Stick to the outside aisles and limit trips down the inner aisles. That's where the ultra processed foods are lurking. Also, go with a list in hand. If you have a list, it'll help you stay focused and it will avoid impulse purchases that are often less healthy. Avoid marketing gimmicks. Gimmicks like low fat or light are code for we took out the fat and added sugar. So check the label to see what's actually inside. Also, don't shy away from the frozen food section. Yes, a lot of prepackaged meals are not good for you, but actually frozen fruits and vegetables are often just as nutritious as fresh ones. They're often picked and frozen at peak ripeness, which help them retain their nutrients without the need for preservatives. You can also consider hydroponically grown vegetables. These are often grown in controlled environments without pesticides, so you don't need to look for organic labels. You can just get the hydroponically grown foods. So in New York City, I actually have lots of these options because there's Urban Farms, that's actually a brand, or Gotham Greens, that's another brand. These are basically hydroponically grown lettuce, herbs, or even tomatoes. I've even seen strawberries. They're so expensive, but they're grown in these indoor greenhouses and they're so beautiful. They don't have any bruising or anything like that, but it's like $14 for a package of them and like about 14 strawberries. Another way to avoid packaged food is just to batch cook and meal prep. By batch cooking and meal prepping, you get to control what goes into your food, from the type of oil you use to the amount of salt. So spend some time on the weekend prepping grains, roasting veggies, or marinating your proteins, and you'll have healthier choices throughout the week. Let's recap what we covered today. So we talked about how to identify the hidden ingredients that should be affecting your health and how to make healthier choices by understanding what's on the label. Remember, knowledge is power. So knowing how to read the labels help you make decisions that can positively impact your longevity. Start by checking the labels on your favorite foods that you have lying around at home. You might be surprised by what you'll find. Throw away the bad stuff, or if you want, share them with me on social media. I'm at Hillary Lynn MD on Instagram, YouTube, everywhere. Share and follow with everyone too. We'll be diving into a lot more about nutrition and supplements and food in the upcoming episodes. You can also find me at my website, hillarylynn.com. I'll be also introducing more resources on reading labels, healthy grocery shopping lists, and upcoming webinars for your enjoyment. Until next time, stay tuned and stay healthy.